Click the button that shows 4 L shapes.
Okay. Hey, everyone. Good afternoon. Looks like we've got a good size group moving in. As always, we'll give everyone a few minutes to pile in, and then we'll start off here. As always, we'll go through the pre-submitted questions, which we have 2 today, assuming that they're both requesters are here. And then we'll jump in to y'all's questions. You can use Q&A section, you can use the chat, or just raise your hand, and we will get to you. Yeah. Yes, sir. Mr. Corey, good to hear from you too. I see you needed to come back to the well, to the source of truth. In fact, we got one of your questions up here first. But let's give everyone just another minute or 2, and then we will kick off here. Oh, okay. Jeff said he's sent one in too. All right, so here we go. Let me get my list here. Find my email from Sabrina. All right, so let's start with Mr. Anderson. And Corey, you can unmute yourself if you'd like, sir. We've let you speak. The question here is, I will copy it into the chat for everyone else to be able to read, is about Postgres connection strings.
Correct.
So I got one to work on my local here. It doesn't look fancy at all. If I look at I installed Connect and Postgres locally. So everyone, Corey's asking about the format of a Postgres connection string. I'm in system integrations, databases, Postgres 1, which is the Postgres connection I created. And if I look at a database definition, this is what I have, which is the default user, the password I set on the install, the port, and then just the server itself. And this, I'm running some copied query off the internet that if I look at is just to see if I can connect and I can run this PG stat replication. I don't actually know what this is. So I don't think there's anything fancy from the connection string format standpoint.
And that's what I was hoping. So trying to think of all of the other areas of roadblocks that I could potentially be running into, because I was all I wanted to verify was, can this work in the wild somewhere?
Mm-hmm.
So you have
like a username and password.
I do, and a database that I want to connect to.
Have you tried finding one of the like a Postgres GUI tool? Start there.
Yeah, and I have connected. I'm using the VS Code connector.
Okay.
So I have connected to it. I have run queries. I have run updates. So I know that there is read-write capability using the.
But that's from your local, right?
From my local, correct. Not from the application server.
Okay.
So that was why I wanted to just verify there as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that to me sounds like, but in your connections, your actual connection itself is failing on test.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's probably permissions or something between the app server and the database. And they didn't have to do anything special to get your local to connect to it?
No.
That argues against permissions.
Do
you connect to the VPN or anything to do it?
My local had to connect to the VPN. Our application servers are already behind the firewall.
Okay.
Behind a VPN. On the forum post, somebody said, check to see if the port 5432 is open.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a ticket out to figure out if that port is open or not.
I just ran the installer this morning looking at your question, and that's the default port that Postgres wants to install itself to. but you're
Okay.
hitting it from your local. And I would assume, are you specifying the port in the connection string from Visual Studio Code?
Yes, which is still 5432. And,
Okay.
but, being that these are dev machines and prod machines, they probably have all of the non MS SQL ports closed.
Mm-hmm. Well, it would be the port on the database, not on the app server, right? That's the port
Is
for the
that-
database server, not on for our side.
So do I need to change? So our database for decisions is held on a different application server.
Sure, not a problem.
Yeah. Do I need to verify that there's connection from the database server or
No.
from the decisions application? Yeah. Okay.
Decisions to the Postgres server, but the 5432 is the port that the Postgres database server wants to listen on.
Correct.
So the app server has to be able to hit the Postgres server. I would just confirm general connectivity, like with a ping or some other test. You could run a command prompt probably, and a flow if it's too slow. If it's too slow to wait on the IT team there, and just see if you can ping it, see if you get a response back.
Good call.
But that has all the hallmarks of a permissions issue. Likely not on the sender side, not on our end, but on the receiving end of those calls.
Okay.
But nothing fancy in the format of the connection string, from what I am seeing on my test, admittedly to my local. It's just, I just copied the connection string, hacked off a bunch of stuff like min pool, max pool stuff, and then got to this, which was working. So I know this works at least.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, sir. Good to hear from you. Hope you are well.
Same to you.
All right, let's see. Sabrina, do we have the other question that you sent me? Is that individual on the call?
Yes.
Okay, we have a question from Max. How do you configure and use states to track process of flow and assignments? And how can I retrieve a flow data from a task to update Initiator about state changes in assigned task? Okay. Let me quickly get a folder for us to work in here. I probably need to clean this up. Let me let me get myself set here. Create designer folder root. Lunch and learn. All right. All right, and then here I'll create a folder to work in, which is stateful questions. All right, so Max, your first question, how do you configure and use states to track the process of flow and assignments? You need to give yourself a folder to work in. And if we click data types integration, the default type we have, or the sort of most common one, is a flow execution extension. And this allows us to extend a process folder so that we can create stateful flows, which I'll show you here in just a minute. So I'll create a thing called a loan application. I'll just give it a single string property, and I'll go ahead and save this. What I'll then do is build a quick flow here called like launch new or submit new loan or something. And I'm going to use 3 steps here. I'm going to find a setup process folder step. I'm going to use 2 set state steps. 1, 2. And I'm going to use a show form. I'm going to create a form. I'm going to sequence this up in this order here. And I'll go ahead and create on a very, per my normal work, a very ugly form. I'm not even going to put any content on this form. I'll just submit a single outcome path button and save this. And then I'll connect to my set state step here. So the setup process folder, if you notice, I'm going to come here. I'm going to configure a couple things. This is a decision specific step that sets up a folder, and we'll see down here allows us to use our own custom data to add data to that folder. So it's a folder. That means I need to find a parent folder. I'll just put it in my stateful questions designer project. And I'll go ahead and just set some constants here for some of these things. This will be loan, new loan app or something. And then here, I'm going to click use extension data. And in this drop-down list, it should show me my type name, which is loan application. And I'll set build data on my extension data. That's all I want to do there. This is going to set up a process folder for me. And then I can set the state of that process folder before and after an assigned form. So what I'm going to do here is come to set state, and I'll change this to awaiting approval. If at any moment I'm not answering the question you're asking, please feel free to jump in and help me understand. And this will be completed. And then on the form here, I'll change this from in session to assigned. I'm going to assign this to myself as a member of the administrators group. The assignment name, I'll just make a constant, which is new loan to approve. And the assignment action name will be approve loan. And then I can go ahead and run this. All right, what I'll do, I get my really simple, ugly form. I get a notification in the top right-hand corner that I have an assignment. And what you'll notice now is if I come back into my stateful questions folder, there's a thing called submit loan here, which has a prefix and a prefix. If I click into this, you'll see a series of views on the right. I have started, and then you'll see awaiting approval, which is shown as the current state, and my task. If I complete that task, oh, let me run this for real, sorry. I'm gonna save this and run my flow here. Submit new loan. Then here's my new folder. I have an assignment here. So this is a loan application, which is in the awaiting approval state. If I approve this, it'll prompt me to complete my form. I can complete my form and it will be complete. So it requires the use really of, you can have lots of ways to do this, but it would be to pair up an assignment with one of the types of folder data types that we have, which would be these flow execution extensions I just quickly demoed here, a folder extension or a case. And that is our simplest example of how to create some stateful processes with assignments.
Okay.
What I would also recommend you do is look at, let's see, I don't know which of these is the best. Case entities. So you might want to look at cases here. A lot of our team enjoys these more. They're shorter, they're sort of shorter individual flows. Creating and using case entity data structure. And this might also be a helpful document to look at as well. I'll drop this in the chat here. You might have some success looking at that. To your set, any questions about that?
No, actually, that made sense. You're very helpful.
Okay. And how can a flow retrieve data from a task to update the initiator about state changes in the assigned task? Now, the simplest way would be to make sure the design of the flow notifies the submitter automatically. So in the simplest way, if I come back to here, is we might, on approval, drop a send email step in. And one of the things you can get is we might say this is from admin@decisions.com. And the to address would be the submitter. Now we can get access to that in our flow data. So if I change this from constant to select from flow, I have a default property available in the flow engine called flow data. And I can find is it initiator email address? Initiating user email. So this is the person that submitted the task. I guess I need to actually do build array select value, excuse me, since this is a list. And then what I can do is I can say, your loan has been approved, and with some body context here. And so the design of the flow itself on the completion of this task will email the initiating user, the person that launched this workflow, an email with whatever configurable content I want to have available here.
And is that possible to do after the second set status?
Say that question again, I'm sorry.
Is it possible to also have that information after the second set state?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You can do this at any point you want in the diagram. I just happen to put it here. It could be oops, yeah, it can absolutely be after. There's no relationship between when the send email step and the state step need to occur.
Okay.
So absolutely.
That helps greatly. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and question from Jeff. We have a pattern we use to we've established over table integration, get select steps and additional table access based on expected results. Grouped in this manner within each folder, we have many of these flows. Okay, Jeff, can you help me understand what your question here is? I see database access. This is a designer folder full of lots of flows.
Yeah, so what we did is we kind of split it up into the behavior we were looking for. So
Okay,
instead of just getting by something from a table,
okay,
we created flows to say, well, in this case, if usually like if you're getting it by the primary key, you're expecting a record to come back.
right.
So in that case, if there's no record that comes back, we throw an error because there's a problem.
Okay,
But if you have a flow over a table access, say where you're getting by a non-primary key, you may or may not get records,
right.
or you may get more than one, and you might
Okay.
not be expecting it. So
Yeah, okay,
and originally we set this up because way back when we started in version 3 and maybe 4, you couldn't see dependencies on table steps. So that was another thing we did. So we could have one flow that you access
Right.
the table access, and then
right, exactly.
track dependencies.
Okay,
But I was just looking to see if there was a way to abstract that a little bit so that we don't have a folder full of like basically the same flow with just different table names. And feel free, a correct answer could be that's dumb, or maybe Decisions handles that natively now and we just didn't know about it. So.
So it's that you have this same pattern in place for every database connection you have, right?
Yeah, every single flow in each folder looks exactly the same. The only thing that's different is like the output data type, the table type, and the input ID name. So
now we do have a no data returned outcome path now. Like that you should be able to get like I think I have some database steps. Let's see here, local connection, there you go. Entity folder, table. So get by ID. You have done failed. The only thing I can think about we've added is, no, we don't have it on these. There is some steps that now return, like give you the no data output path. That's the only thing I can think we've done differently in between 3 and newer versions that might preclude the need for these. It is nice to have it wrapped like this. It does sort of create overhead, I guess. There's sort of a bunch of similar things. We have access patterns but so you can fetch by particular properties. But this is more about wrapping it in a check to see if you got some item back or not, right? That's the primary reason.
yeah, just abstracting that so you don't have to repeat that in every flow.
I think this is still the best pattern.
Okay.
Do you mind if I share this on the screen so everyone can see what we're talking about?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll bring this over. And Jeff is saying they've created a series of these accessor subflows where they pair up their table step with a check to confirm if the item, if there's a fail, to handle the failed path, and to confirm if there's a null return, because this step won't fail if there is no data returned. It will just come down and send a null downstream. And his question is, back early on when his team started working in Decisions 3, is there a better way to do this? And I would say no. This would still be the pattern I would recommend people to use today. Okay. Because you don't want to, every time you use a get by ID step, you don't want to have to both put in exception handling and a null check for that. So this still aligns with our best practices for sure.
Okay, I should have sent you an image of an example from get by ID results possible, because it looks similar, but in that case, instead of throwing an error, if there's no data, we have a separate path for found versus not found.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Either way, I would still say I think this is still how I would have advised you to do it. So I don't think there's a platform change that makes this less needed now than it was back when you guys settled on this.
And I'll also give you kudos. One of the big issues we used to have is with the error logging. It used to not complain if you copied this for a different table, but then left the messaging and the parameters in the text merge for the error logging. But you guys have added validation now that if there's a variable in a text merge that doesn't exist.
Yeah, that's relatively recent too. Yeah, in fact, that's like 6.10 or newer. It's kind of middling version of 6. We introduced the merge validation stuff. And
that's awesome because it'll at least point that out. So if someone copies this for a different table and then they don't change the logging, it'll show that.
Right. Yeah. No, exactly. Yeah. No, I think this still aligns with best practices, man. I wouldn't change anything about this.
Okay, great. Thanks, Will.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let me move this out of the way. And all right, got a question here from Chris. For scheduled job, if the initial run bumps into a "we're not ready yet" reply from a service, how would you recommend implementing a wait for 10 minutes and try again? Let's see here. I would just have, so like you want to handle, so you're making a service call and you get some sort of non 200 code back, Chris?
For example, yeah.
Okay. And
so or maybe even a 200 code, but the message is basically saying, not ready yet, try again later.
Now, you could code up a retry event loop yourself, though you might want to, if this is a more lightweight flow, I don't know if it is, I would just say maybe increase the frequency of its run. Because you might get into a place where you back up other scheduled jobs. But you could imagine, let me just create a quick flow, which is scheduled job. And in here, I'll find one of our generic REST steps, which I think if I just search, no, if I search get, that'll probably bring up a million results, but I can probably get it. Get, never mind. All right, integration, HTTP, here's a get step. Now, most of our steps have a failure on exception path. So in this example, let's assume you get a non 200 response from your external service. You're going to come down the on exception. Now, the sort of simplest way would be to use, I don't know that this is what I would love, but would be to use like a pause. And you could then compute to resume at a certain point in the future. So you could say resume in 10 minutes. And then try again. Now, the problem here is you probably, to do this the right way, would want to initialize some sort of counter. And then on this loop, check the counter to make sure you can never break out of this loop, if that makes any sense. You might want to try 2 to 3 times. You might initiate a counter here, which would be retry counter, which would be an int. And then every time you try, you would need to add to it. Use an add step. Done goes there. Let's assume it goes somewhere. You would add to it and then do like a greater than check. Greater than. So add it, and then, if it's greater than, kill the loop, otherwise stay in it. And here you could, every time you go through it, you could add 1 to your counter, update your counter. And then here you could always check to make sure you don't ever do like more than 5 loops, something like this. So you could pause it. I think this is one way to design it in the flow. If it's a flow that runs more aggressively, I think the ideal way would just be to let the job run again. So maybe this runs on some aggressive frequency. But if you need a retry, if you want to code up retry events in your flow, then you can either utilize or expose, like I did here, the add outcome for exception, and then code up some retry logic loop. Andrew, can we make sure this gets covered in a doc ticket, please, under exception handling? I think Andrew's on here. Andrew should be promoted to a panelist, please. Yeah, so this is, if you want to code up retry loops, this would be the normal pattern that we see with customers.
Okay. I think what prompted the question is that the pause flow step is not something I would necessarily want in a scheduled job, right?
Correct.
And even outside of a scheduled job, I think the question becomes, I've heard advice that it is a problematic step in terms of, in terms of something you should avoid, but then that brings up the question of what would be my alternative if I want to try again, and after a short while, but I don't want to plug up my, so I don't want to run it, every 10 minutes all day, every day. Not that it can't, it's just that, this was intended to look for a data result that's supposed to be finished at 6 a.m. And then, if it's not done, try again, but eventually, as in before 8 o'clock, stop and tell the rest of the world we're in trouble, right?
Right.
So on the one hand, I don't want my scheduled jobs to back up because this thing is holding out for a result. But on the other hand, it's kind of like, well, then, I'm not going to be running it all the time. What would you do in that case?
I mean, I guess theoretically, on an exception, you could dump it into the background threads if you wanted it to run and then pause. And you really don't want to pause there. Or you might, maybe there's retry logic at the start of the flow. So if it fails, you write a should be retried again. And then here you check that in some way. I'm not sure if that makes sense. Like you run it aggressively, even though it never runs, right? And it runs, maybe I don't know, there's like a time check and something else. So you check the time. So like if you get let's assume here you actually write, and these aren't, what you do is you actually insert a record to a database and then check that record. And so you're running this very aggressively just to check if you should run again. And if it does hit, that knows if the record shows, it's gone down the exception path, and you could check that. You'd probably have to check last time ran when, or last successful run or something.
So
like
in that case, what you'd say is schedule the job to run perhaps every 10 minutes starting, and then its first thing to do is to verify whether we're done for today or not.
Yeah, exactly. And you could just use a simple data structure, checking to, simple database structure to store off that data as it executes. That'd be pretty straightforward, I think. And that way you can both have the aggressive check, not use the pause step, and not incur any real overhead. I mean, to spin something up and do one of these checks is extremely lightweight. So thinking off the top of my head, I might recommend something like that. Does that work for you?
I think so. I just kind of have to think through that. It does then mean that for most of the day, we have this thing asking, should I run, with the answer of no, wait for tomorrow, right?
Right. That's true. I mean, it would fill up, it would give you a bunch of noise in your scheduled job log, but that's really not that big of a deal. You really only care about that when jobs back up or when jobs fail to run. So it having a bunch of extra stuff in there, we've been doing this for 8 years now we run our email check job every 8 minutes for support tickets. So, and that hasn't proved to be any issue for us. So
all right.
I would say that's probably, it's a little bit of extra work to get that harness in place, but I think that was better thinking specifically, because this isn't a long running process, but it's better to let the scheduler do the retry than it is to spend the time coding up a retry in the flow.
Well, and then it makes me also think that I might want to have a utility flow where you feed it like, my name is such and such, and I'm looking for this, have I run yet today? Or something, something crazy like that.
Sure.
So like if I have several jobs that need to do similar checks, they can all ask the question, am I done yet?
Yeah. Yeah, no, there might be some utility there. Sure. But I think either one of these options gets you, a solution to your question. I guess there's trade-offs to each. I don't know that there's a easily identifiable winner.
Yeah, I think the drawback with the pause flow is that, I mean, I wouldn't want to do that in an interactive session, right? And I don't think I'd want to do that in a scheduled session, because then my scheduled jobs could potentially back up. So I guess maybe if that were in a background, one of these things that you send into the, I forget what you call this step, what you call the asynchronous run.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's a spot where the pause flow step actually is a sensible option.
It could absolutely be. Yeah, if you just dump this into an async thread on this exception loop.
Or if this were starting out in an async thread, right?
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yes. Yeah. Okay. I see what you're saying. Like just run it once a day or whatever and launch it asynchronously.
Right.
You probably need some other checks though, just to ensure if this is business critical that async thread completed. So you might have to check that it ran in some way, which you're kind of back into this pattern here of writing and checking something.
Right.
Okay. Got a bunch of other questions in the hopper, Chris, if you gonna move
Yeah,
on here, if that works for you.
That's good. I'm good.
All right, awesome. Thank you, sir. And Jeff's question, POSTGRESQL does not block though, correct? It creates a task. It does create a task if you click save flow data on pause. This will actually operate almost like an assigned form step, where it'll create a persists. I believe pause behaves differently than delay, and delay will actually hold on to the current thread, which is a step you should never use this step. Let me say it that way. The step that shall not be named. Thanks, Corey. And pause flow, it behaves nicer. I just think I would eschew the use of pause steps in general, unless absolutely needed. Likely there's other sort of, now for a retry event here, I don't know that there's another way to do this that I would recommend not using other than using a pause flow step. But yeah, it should, with save process data on, it does create what is effectively a task to restart the flow at a later time. All right, and Brady's got a question here. We have a dev server and a production server with a repo. Can you demo a little bit of how it would work to create something in dev and push to production? Also, is there a way to control specific users that can do this? Yes, so let me see, can I get on innovation test? Oh, here we go. Sorry guys, 1 second. Let me, new command prompts. I got to get on a different server that's connected to a repo server to show you this. Assuming that server is up. Get on the VPN. N10964. Where are you at here? Hello. Can you hear me? Anyone hear me right now?
Yep.
Oh,
Yes, I can hear you.
Weird. I'm connected to VPN. All right, well, let's not get lost on that. So let me see what I can do to answer your questions here. Let's assume in SQL questions, I built a project here. And I'm gonna go to set up a designer repository. So I'm in system settings, designer repo settings. I'm going to leave all of this the same, even though it's not going to actually work. But I think I can give some, actually, I can do sharing, but I won't actually check in. Let me confirm this on a separate screen here, sharing.decisions.com/decisions/primary. Okay. What I've done is I've just configured my repository settings now. This is something that you do when you configure the dev server up. So this localhost is operating like a dev server in this scenario. And now that I've come into design repository settings, I've specified the repository server URL and selected show repository actions. If I were to come back up to stateful questions, which we'll assume is my project, I have design a repository. I can right click, I have design a repository actions, and I can add to project. Now I'm going to create a project here. Right now it'll just be local, and I'll call this LNL examples, repo demo. And then I'm going to add the folder and content. I want to let decisions pick up the contents, find all of the related parts of this project. I click next. It's going to prompt me with a bunch of stuff. And then I can commit these things. So right now, the simplest thing to look at is on the right-hand side here, under the project column, you'll see the project name now, Lunch and Learn Examples, Repo Demo. And these are all of the things that it has just added to that project. Decisions found everything inside this folder and or everything used by things inside this folder that are not part of another project. And that's a really important piece, is in decisions, things can only exist in one project at a time. And then I can commit these. So, okay, let me try this again. I bet I can get this to work. HTTPS sharing.decisions.com/Totinos decisions primary. Let's try this again. So now that this is already part of a project, if I go back to design repository action menu, it doesn't show me add to project because it's already part of a project. It's going to prompt me to check those changes in. Now I can sign in as myself. And then this is me now actually checking into the repo. So there's a local version of a project. Then there's the version in the repo server. And now I can go ahead and I can check in. I can say, this is the first check-in. Yeah, what is this thing? Oh, and it's telling me it needs to include the parent folder, which I'll add. And I'm going to sign into sharing now. Someone remind me to delete this off of our repo server. And so I've completed a new check-in here into the repo server with these things inside of it. From the application server's perspective, if I come back and I try that again, it's going to tell me there's no resources to commit. And if I make a change, which can really, it's not very sophisticated. It's just based on the date stamp of the modified date. I'll make a modification and save this. And then try the repo action again. It's going to then prompt me to say, hey, submit loan. And I'll say changes to submit loan. And I can commit this. And if I bring over the repository, I just, in Designer repository, yeah. And then in here, there's a ton of stuff here, so we'll have to find it. Let me find there's a ton of folders. It's preventing it from showing in the folder tree, which is why I'm doing this right now. Lunch and Learn Examples. So I'm in Lunch and Learn Examples, and I can look at, this is me on the repo server now, looking at my project. I can see inside of, where do I want to go? I want to go to trunk. Yeah, there we go. I'm already on trunk. There we go, branch summary. I can see the resources on the right-hand side. I can see all the check-ins with the particular revision numbers on the left-hand side. And if I come back to my server, checking out is the same process. And I don't have a server to check out to right now because I can't connect. Let me try one more time to see to connect to this other server. That's not going to work. But if I were to come here and I'm already connected, so what I can do is come to System Designers repository. You can see I have two projects here. One's default and one is Lunch and Learn examples repo demo. And I want to check out a new project. This is me deploying for the first time to production. And so I'll find an example. So I won't use a big one because that would be Decisions Internal Webinar. I don't know what this is. I can select the project. I can select a particular branch in the selected project if there are multiple. I can click Advanced. I can check out by a date or a particular revision number. But here I want to check out trunk of this Decisions Internal Webinar project. Oh, so that doesn't have any. Well, that was a bad example. Let's try with something that's a little bit smaller that we know has content. What about customer CRM? That one's not that big. Decisions Internal. Customer CRM. I think that probably has dependencies. Oh, here we go. Example lab, auto checkout process. Perfect. I can check this out. Now it's going to prompt me with the things that are part of this project. I can update that. It's going to download those things. And then I can import this. And it's going to bring this project down onto the application server. So I'm using a different project here. If I look, then now I have the example lab project auto checkout flow, which is what I checked out from the repo server. So it's all about the right-click designer repository actions. So on dev, when you're doing your work, you're right-clicking designer repo and then checking those changes in. And on the server you're checking out to, you're coming to System Designers repository. Now I already have this project. So if I was going to check out, the manner in which you do this depends on how you have your change control process set up. Maybe you do individual branches or you push everything into one branch and then just have you check out a particular revision. You come here, you can check out project. And then you could check out a new version of the project once it was ready to be deployed to production, which is what I'm doing here. I know that was, for even me, that was fast, but Brady, does that help with anything?
Yeah, that was super helpful. And on the production server, are you able to lock down who can check in those stuff or
Absolutely.
check out?
By default, it's admins can, you have to have administrator access to be able to see, to get system level access, for which is what Designers Repository lives under, requires admin. And if you need more than that, we can work together through the support channel to help you understand how to use action visibility rules and other controls to restrict that even more.
That's great. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Save flow data on pause. So Jeff's got a question here. Let me make sure this is in the chat. We were talking about the pause flow step. Just posted Jeff's question in the chat. If I go back to that flow, save flow data on pause. If this setting is not checked in the workflow, you launch a flow, right? It hits this retry loop and it's stuck in the retry loop. Here it's going to run 5 times, checking every 10 minutes. But if the server goes down while that's happening, that will be lost. But if save flow data on pause is selected, when this flow step is hit, it'll save itself into the database as if it's an assigned form, so that when the server comes back online, the job server can pick it up and finish the flow, as if in the same way that assignments persist across restarts. So it allows you to take advantage of the same persistence behavior of an assigned form when using a pause flow step. If that helps, Jeff.
Oh yeah, thanks.
Yeah, and so whoever is our doc person, Andrew, there's some clear improvements, I think, from what Jeff is saying to the doc he's mentioning, please. Okay, a lot of great questions today. Who else has got questions? You guys feel free to just use the raise your hand feature if you'd like. No one's got anything else today? Okay. If that's everything, I'll yeah, you bet, Jeff. Happy to help. I'll go ahead and try to grab some lunch then before, I'm assuming, my afternoon's full of meetings begins. Let me see here. Do I have anything at 1? Okay. Well, thanks everyone. I actually won't be in tomorrow. Someone else is covering for me. I have I have to go to another meeting. So I will see everyone next week, and I really appreciate everyone continuing to join these and ask awesome questions. Thanks everyone. Have a great afternoon.